That's so fascinating. So listen, Alan, let's bring it back here to Dubai. How long have you been here in Dubai?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah,
Okay, that's a lifetime. Okay, how has it been so far?
Wow, it's been amazing. As with so many expats, I actually came on holiday about 20 years ago. At no Burj Khalifa, no Palm Jumeirah, and I stayed in the Sheraton at JBR.
Yes.
And between the Sheraton and the Hilton, that was the only thing there. Nothing.
It was sand.
Nothing.
I remember
there
that,
was
yeah.
a Hard Rock cafe, I think I remember,
That's
where
true.
the marina was, and even then there was just something about it that I loved. So I suppose the story is one of international education for me. So after a brief career in the Royal Navy, during university, I became a teacher, and I actually taught in the Shetland Islands.
Oh.
Which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a rock basically in the middle of the North Sea.
Very cold.
For most of its history belonged to Norway. And then around the 1600s transferred through a royal marriage agreement to Britain. Beautiful island.
What's the population there?
Oh, 9,000. One of the amazing things that I loved was it's the same size there or thereabouts as Manhattan Island. That if you want a visual on it, in the middle of the North Sea. Between Iceland and Scotland and Norway. And on Manhattan Island, what will there be? 10 million, 20 million people? And on Shetland, there's about 9,000 people. So beautiful island, and amazingly, it's actually where P&O, massive ferry shipping company, was founded by a man called Arthur Anderson hundreds of years ago. And he bequeathed a school to the island from the profits of P&O Ferry, and then oil was discovered
over there.
Scottish Norwegian oil, and every barrel of oil that's landed onto the Shetland Islands transported to the rest of the world. Some profit from that is bequeathed to the school, which is called Anderson School, after Arthur Anderson. And believe it or not, it's a school that, because it's in the middle of the North Sea, I think there's something in the world about, if you live by the sea, you have an outlook that is adventurous. It's out there. You look out to the sea and you think, I suppose it's almost that Viking mentality that there must be something further. So the school is very forward thinking and wants children who are educated on this rock in the middle of the North Sea to be global citizens, and formed partnerships with New Zealand schools, North American schools, Japanese schools. So I landed here as a young teacher, and a marvellous man called Stuart Hay ran this global classroom project where he said, I don't want these Shetland children to not have a global mindset, and took children from the school and teachers, young teachers like myself, to Japan, to New Zealand, to Boston.
When was that?
That was, oh my goodness,
90s?
late 1980s, early 1990s. World was probably slightly smaller place, but this man in this school had a vision that was much beyond that. So even as a young educator of children, I was thinking about global education and the importance, of course, arriving in Japan, arriving in New Zealand, arriving in Australia.
Gives you a different worldview,
of course. And I think from that moment, I always said, at the right time, I would like to work internationally, not just
locally
in the UK. So
So that was immediately after you graduated, and after you finished your service.
Yeah. So into teaching, and then from there, built my way back up through the UK. Went back to the UK, built my way up through administration, became a principal, and then a director of a cluster of schools, and then I met another tremendous. I think one of the things about innovation that I know we'll talk about at some stage is also luck, and I'm fascinated by the dynamic of entrepreneurs or anyone about what chance does luck play in your life as well. So luck to land in the Anderson High School and meet this incredible man called Stuart Hay and travel the world. And then I was at an international education conference in London and met a man called Kevin Steadman, and I was still very UK based there. I'd had an incredible opportunity through Tony Blair's government. And remember, Tony Blair's catchphrase was education.
Yes,
So
that,
the British government actually paid for, I think, about 10 headmistresses to go and study at Harvard. So I had this incredible opportunity where I studied in the Harvard Education Center and was blown away by and inspired by the opportunities that gave me. Anyway, I digress. At this conference, by chance or not, I met Kevin Steadman. Now, Kevin had opened King's Education here in Dubai. And I said that I was interested in international education. I said, I've been to Dubai. What an incredible city and country the UAE is. And he said, look, we have King's Dubai down at Sakim, and we are opening this school, King's School Al Barsha. We're growing the brand. Why don't you come and interview for the post?
That was around 2010?
Yeah, so no, the King's School Al Barsha, I think, opened in 2015, but was born in 2014 in terms of the thinking behind it. So arrived at a fledgling King's School Al Barsha, and of course, you know Dubai is better than me, and you've got sort of Arabian ranches on the east of the city, and then you've got desert. This is in 2014, 2015, desert. Then you've got Al Quoz and then the Burj Al Arab, where King's Dubai was. And of course, you arrive at that crossroads, no Dubai Hills, and you think, this is madness. Why would you be...
What month was that?
January, I think.
Oh, January. So weather is okay.
Yeah, weather's okay, but it's not so much that. It's like this school...
If you add to that
is in
July...
yeah, of course. that came later in the journey. But you've got this school in the middle of nowhere. And you talk about innovation and entrepreneurship and vision. And a man called Tayyab al-Bakr runs King's, Emirati owner. And the vision that man had to say, this school will be a gold mine. You know, it will be the center of a crossroads on Sakim with Dubai Hills and Al Furjan now. What a visionary, you know. And so, became the principal of King's School Al Barsha. And then Kevin actually was ill and is now recovered and is doing well and is leading Rashid and Latifa to a new future. Still very friendly with them and transformed my life in so many ways. So Mr. Bakr asked me to be the head of King's, and very successful. The schools grew, and then Taaleem approached me, and I was just so excited by the Taaleem story. when you look at the foundation of that company 20 years ago, founded for all the right reasons to give 3-4 incredible Emirati gentlemen still on the board, with a vision which was twofold, which was to improve education in Dubai and the UAE, but also, which is ironic because we became a public company in November last year, and also to allow an avenue for investment into education. That's why I love the IPO story, because it was almost the fruition of these 4 gentlemen who met in a hotel.
Success,
exactly,
isn't it?
And that
Hilal is one of them, right?
Yes, Hilal Al-Mari, Ziad Azam, Ahmed Al-Kaya, you know, amazing businessmen.
Yes.
So the excitement for Taaleem for me was more curriculum and more cities. You know, King's was fantastic, but it was UK curriculum, 3 schools, 1 city. Taaleem is Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and now, of course, the Northern Emirates and into rural Abu Dhabi through the public-private partnership. But it was the curriculum. It was American curriculum, IB curriculum, UK curriculum, ministry curriculum. And I suppose this is, again, back to innovation and entrepreneurship. I think to be a CEO, you must have that drive to look beyond what you're presently doing constantly and say, you know, what's next? What else can I achieve?
And probably challenge assumptions.
Can we achieve? Yeah. So yeah, that's my story of Dubai.
It's fascinating. I mean, since the time you visited it 20 years ago, and your venture in that northern sea is just amazing, and how things just align for you to be able to come here in an international city such as Dubai. And you mentioned this King's School, and just a quick tangent here. This is no different, and I'm not saying this because obviously we're living here in Dubai and this is a beautiful city, but it goes back to even the late Sheikh Rashid, the kind of late ruler of Dubai, and the famous story of how he envisioned the Port Rashid, the port, right? So, and when he asked for the design, it was ahead of its time and everybody opposed it. But he said, it's okay, do it. The dry docks, right? He said, it's okay, do it. And they did it. But then look at what Dubai now. It's like one of the best ports in the world. So that's kind of the legacy of the leadership here.
Yeah.
This
I mean, I love all those time lapses that you see of Dubai, you know, and you get this Sheikh Zayed Road and then the World Trade Center. And actually, Mr. Bakr and ANC built those 5 towers, the tiny towers now. So I used to love
the Trade Center ones.
Yeah,
the one that always before and after Dubai, before and after.
Still there.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
I used to love and still love talking to the likes of Hilal Al-Mari or Adil Al-Zaruni or Tayyib Al-Bakr about the transformation of Dubai. And you know, I think that's why your podcast is so relevant, because, as you said, even back to Sheikh Rashid, it's all about innovation, isn't it? It's all about vision. It's all about enterprise and entrepreneurship and having that vision to say, you know, this can actually happen. And I think the story of Dubai in so many ways is, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but that my story is relevant to that. As you said, imagine by chance coming on holiday here 20 years ago, which ironically I now think back was probably, I've not calculated it, the year that Taaleem were founded as
20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
This is serendipitous.
I know.
And the way Dubai is positioning itself and the risks it's taking. I mean, look at if you look at entrepreneurship at a large scale, it's all about taking risks. It's of course calculated risks. It's all about trying things, throwing things, and hoping things will stick. And then whatever sticks, you take it, you amplify it, and then you move on. It's about trying new things because the old things didn't work, or because there's a problem you want to solve, or there's an opportunity you want to achieve, or you want to tap into. You mentioned Taaleem and the different curriculums that it has. And here in the UAE, and let's just kind of focus a little bit on education in the UAE, and this is because this is your forte, obviously. And when it comes to education, it's all about trying things. One thing that, and I'm no expert, I'm literally inquiring to understand the rationale behind it. One thing about trying things, and I hate to call it this way because it demeans the effort, but just to illustrate, and correct me if I'm wrong, window shopping, like trying lots of things, hoping something will stick. What impact does it have on the generations here, instead of just sticking to one thing that is tried and tested and fit for the culture and for the, let's say, environment here? How does that play with this, generally speaking?
Yeah, wow, big question. Look, I think the immediate thing that came to mind was the last part of your question, because I think the government and the regulators have made an effort, which I've even seen change over my 10 years here, which is to ensure that whatever curriculum is out there and whatever school is built, it's still underpinned by Arabic language for expat and for Arabic passport holders, Islamic education, if that is your religion, and what they call the national agenda. So the importance of literacy, the importance of Arabic language, the importance of English, maths, science as a basis and basic education, almost back to the 3 R's of the 19th century education, arithmetic, which is obviously not an R, writing and reading. And reading is still underpinned in the national agenda. And it's actually the government's determination that the UAE will climb up the international league tables in relation to some international testing. Without getting too technical, that's like PIRLS, TIMSS, PISA.
Yes, I'm aware of those.
And honestly, even in the last 10 years, the progress that the UAE has made in its education across all curricula in relation to climbing the league tables. I think the Dubai private schools were a phenomenal. I can't remember, but they set a target of being 19th in the world, and we were way above that. So that's not quite answering your question. That's saying that what the city is perhaps, or the country has been good at, both cities, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, is innovating, being creative, being entrepreneurial, but still ensuring that the basics, whether that's Arabic or Islamic education, or whether that is maths, English and science, are still fundamentally at the basis of education. In terms of the wider and bigger question that you ask, I think I can't remember how many curricula is out there, but there are Russian schools, there are French schools, there are IB schools, there are American schools, and that's been encouraged in relation to giving choice, which is at the heart of parent
obligations.
Just parents' rights to try different schools, and when you open a school in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, you have to submit an academic and business plan. And I think that's great. That's the regulator saying, is the school right for the city? But it's also, from a business perspective, will it work?
Will it sustain?
Will it sustain? Because you bring in a child to KG or grade 1, you want them still to be there in grade 12. So I actually respect ADEC and KHD, who are the regulators, and there's other regulators in Sharjah, etc., ensuring that any new school will be sustainable and secure. But actually, to come again, I will get to your point, and I love the title of this academic and business plan. This is where you have to love the UAE creativity and entrepreneurial thinking. It's called Hearts and Minds. What a name for opening a school!
Very philosophical.
Yeah. Well, what they're saying is the values of the school right? This new school, and is the mind right? Is it actually going to develop children? And they will push you to say, in what way is the school going to be different for the city of Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and what's its USP? How are you going to teach the curriculum? How are you going to ensure Emiratis can come into the school? How are you going to ensure that Arabic and Islamic will be strong? What innovation will you be teaching? What entrepreneurial skills will you be teaching? In what way are you thinking about the future? So even from the outset of a school being designed, and parents won't know this, there's been a lot of creative thinking gone in, which is part of regulation.
So I think you answered my question
beautifully. Maybe, did I?
No, you did beautifully, because I think, and this is, I'll reiterate my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. So my question was, I felt like with all of those curriculums, like UK, New Zealand, US, IB, and others,
of course,
it's sort of, in my world, gambling with with children's future, trying to fit something and see and test with generations. But then obviously this is grounded as per our understanding from how things work here, with the culture, the language, the religion, and obviously the national agenda, which is preserving the culture of this part of the world, Dubai and the UAE and the GCC, generally speaking. So that's brilliant, because at the end of the day, you should be agnostic to the way, to the tool, and you should have the aim in mind, which is education, which is the learning, the teaching learning sort of formula. And if you're able to give choice, like you said, to parents, especially that 90% of the population is expats, then that's even adding far more value to people to come and stay here. So yeah, I mean, this answers it perfectly. But then the other part of the question, or the kind of extension to this question, is, what problems do you see because of this method? Pragmatically speaking.
To get very, very practical, I think the problem is the challenge of what's called the UAE inspection framework. And, you know, I don't envy the inspectors, the task that they have, but we have a generic framework for judging schools, evaluating schools. And that inspection framework has to cover, let's not list, well, I'll list them again: French, Russian, IB, US, UK. And they're all very different curriculum with very different parameters, and even set by the Department of Education in England, or the IB International Baccalaureate in Europe, or the US. And remember, the US curriculum is actually 50 plus different curriculum. New York has its own curriculum. California has its own curriculum. So how do you come in as the UAE regulator, and it's the Dubai Schools Inspection Framework, or URTCA and ADEC, and evaluate that school, when the way the French authorities or the British authorities or the IB or the Russian authorities will evaluate their schools is very, very different. Now, why is that even important? It's important because parents, perhaps, teachers and principals for certain, CEOs for certain, and governing boards or ownership want their schools to be the best. And the best is judged, I think, rightly and wrongly, by the outcome of this inspection. So, you know, we have 20 schools that are out of 250 or whatever it is that are judged to be outstanding. 39 that are very good, and then some that are good, acceptable, weak. But in actual fact, the reason I paused on parents is parents are much less concerned by this than a CEO thinks. Because a parent, and I am a parent, you're a parent, fundamentally, I want my daughter to be happy. And if she's happy,
and get right education,
she'll do well. wherever she is, in whatever school she's in, if she's happy and is keen to learn and is inspired by her teachers, then she'll do well. Curriculum agnostic, you know, she'll do well in the IB, she'll do well in the UK. But principals, because of the pressures that people like me put them under, and I'm very lucky because I have a board of directors that have been in this business for 20 years and understand the business and understand what I've just said, that, for example, Taaleem's most profitable and at capacity schools are not always rated outstanding. Some of them are rated very good. Some of them are rated very good. So parents are not as caught up
as much as, let's say,
as me. So you said practically, what is the issues with so many different curriculum? I think that most of the schools that are outstanding are UK curriculum.
Okay.
And
interesting.
I think without going into detail, the curriculum in the UK is very staged. It's very clear on how you define student progress in terms of academics. It has stages. It has a SAT test at the end of year 6 into year 7. It has a GCSE and it has an A-level. So an inspection team is able to come in and say, children from KG through to grade 12 are making progress. Whereas I'll have to be careful because I love the UK curriculum as well, but I think the IB curriculum is beautiful. But it's less defined in terms of how is a student making progress.
Quantitatively?
Exactly, yeah. So
it's easy to compare and assess quantitative.
Exactly. Qualitative, much
more kind of fluffy.
So actually there's very few IB schools that are rated outstanding, and because, and I don't blame the inspectors, they do a wonderful job trying to judge French, Russian, Chinese, IB, UK, but I think the IB curriculum is about pedagogy, it's about philosophy, it's about charity, it's about creative thinking, you know, and it's harder, as you mentioned, to come in from a quantitative viewpoint and say the children are at 1 and they're moving to 2 and they're moving to 3.
Because you can't do regression analysis and statistical analysis on Excel sheets if it's qualitative.
Exactly.
That doesn't work. And doing qualitative work, it's so much time consuming and efforts, and it needs certain level of competency to be able to
deeper understanding
of it.
And I'm not saying the inspectors don't have that deeper understanding.
No, it's not about the inspectors. I think it's about the capacity, right? I mean, it's easier to quantitatively crunch data for hundreds of thousands of students and get your reports on your dashboard if it's quantitative.
Exactly.
But how do you do it if it's qualitative? You can't.
And you don't really do that in the IB curriculum until the last minute.
Because it's based on qualitative
and it's only at the diploma phase, which is grade 12, that you finally reach that judgment. Interestingly though, and I think this is fascinating, especially in relation to sort of innovation and creativity, the children who are doing best in the international testing, PIRLS, TIMSS, PISA, are actually IB children, where
that's a fascinating
thinking skills and creativity and innovation is actually at the heart of the curriculum rather than learning 2 + 2 = 4.
Yes. So,
which of course they still do.
Of course, I mean they have to.
Knowledge has to be at the heart of it.
So you have. I mean the way I think of education, and every time I speak to my daughters, and try to make sure that they understand 2 things. So every time I sit with them, I make sure that they understand 2 things. There's foundational knowledge that you must have no matter what you do. Like you said, math, basic physics, basic chemistry, basic biology. So all of those, you need to understand them at a foundational level. Now, then your mind will gravitate towards something. You will feel that there's a pull that pulls you towards something, whether it's natural sciences, whether it's humanities and philosophy and economics and everything in between. The challenge that you posed here is very interesting, because this is an observation that I think, especially me and Iman, when we talk about the educational landscape in Dubai specifically, and in the UAE generally, and the GCC at large, with all of the national agendas that are being now developed for 2030 and 2031. And if you read all of those, whether it's Saudi, Qatar, Oman, UAE, Bahrain, even Kuwait, all of them have education at the number one, right? Education, innovation, education, innovation. There's no platform, no forum that innovation is mentioned and you can't find education, because education is the root for innovation. So with all of everything that you've mentioned now, which is fascinating observation that I think deserves its really empirical research to kind of hone down on the specifics, so policymakers are able to make these tweaks, because just really tweaks that we need to do. How does that impact students' creativity, generally speaking? You touched on IB, but I'm talking about at the macro level, right? At a city level, at a country level. What do you think?
Wow. Look, I think I worry about it sometimes, because knowledge has to be at the foundation. I've had the honour and the privilege of visiting so many lessons in my life. And actually, I reflect back and say, imagine going back to be a teacher now, because I've had the wealth and the privilege of seeing so many amazing teachers. And I've seen good lessons, I've seen bad lessons, and I've seen lessons that have failed, and that's okay. You know, as long as we can have a discussion about it and learn from it. And sometimes when a teacher is trying to be innovative and trying to be creative, they'll start a discussion and a debate, which is actually such a wonderful way to learn. Whether you're debating a scientific experiment or a mathematical equation or a political theory or a historical event, debate and discussion is actually
absolutely
what's at the root of a podcast. Is so powerful to learning. But where it doesn't work, so that sort of concept of discussion and cooperative learning and creative learning, often it doesn't work if the students don't have the knowledge to actually engage with the debate. And that knowledge might be a deeper knowledge of the historical events or the mathematics behind the equation or the theory behind the hypothesis of the scientific experiment.
Or even basic understanding of emotional intelligence, to not get personal in the discussion,
That's
right?
the wider part of
so it
that
starts
creative
from
learning, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got that knowledge of, right, we're going to debate this hypothesis on this scientific experiment before we do it. What will go right? What will go wrong? What might happen? What an amazing question in terms of sort of innovation for a lesson. And I love that type of lesson. But the children have to, and you've got me thinking, have the knowledge to have that debate and think about what might happen when I put this into acid or alkali.
Which is a skill on its own, isn't it?
Of course. But also, as you said, the wider part of a debate and discussion is the emotional intelligence to understand that if you disagree with me, that's fine.
That's actually
it's good, because you're helping me challenge my own thinking. So if you just take everything that I've said, that has to be at the heart of a good education, a very good education, an outstanding education, because human capital is everything now, isn't it? And the UAE needs a generation like their present generation to come through with those thinking skills, with that level of creativity, with that level of drive and enterprise, in order to take the nation to the next level. And I've had the honour of and privilege over my 10 years here to work with the most senior Emiratis, whether it's through our engagement with the executive committee, or indeed the Emirati members of the Taaleem board, who are also involved at government level. And these ladies and gentlemen are honestly brilliant thinkers. They are up there. MIT graduates, Harvard graduates, Russell Group Ivy League graduates. But you were talking about the national agenda and innovation and education sitting beside everything. And what we're really proud of at the moment is our work in public-private partnership.
Right.
And that is people at the top levels of government understanding that expat education is going well. Education for the wealthiest parts of the Emirati community is going well. They go to schools like Jumeirah Baccalaureate School, Uptown International School, American Academy for Girls, which we're proud of. They go to GEM schools, etc. as well. But actual fact, there is a demographic of the Emirati community, and whether it's in the Northern Emirates or whether it's in the rural parts of Abu Dhabi, or whether it's actually in the cities of Abu Dhabi and Dubai, you went to public school, and I actually the astronauts visited our schools the other day, and they went to public school. So public schools are great. I'm not sitting here saying public education's not doing well. There are parts of public education where we have a lot to learn from them.
I had only one subject which is in English, which is English. And that's it. Everything else was in Arabic.
Yeah, but
all the way until I was 18.
Yeah, but look at, you're a successful businessman, and these astronauts have just represented the nation in space, and they went to public schools with the same background. So
there's more to it than to
exactly.
Than
At the outset, right? I'm not saying public education is wrong, but some public schools, and they've taken the New York charter schools as a model and put that into Abu Dhabi. They've created a project called the Agile, which you'll know in Arabic, like a new generation education.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't pronounce it well.
Agile. It means generations.
Yes. So that's going on in the Northern Emirates, and here in Dubai, we have an incredible project called the Dubai Schools, which is
similar concept for PPP
and Arabic Emirati students to go to a best value but ambitious project here in Dubai. Now, this is also about raising ambition and aspiration of students and Emirati students in particular, to ensure that they have the skill set for the next generation of leadership in their country.
For innovation. But I need to just kind of hone down on your, what do you see as the impact of those inspections? Because there are two levels of impact. There's one impact on students, and there's another impact on teachers. And I have fair amount of experience with
sure teaching. You
do. Because of my wife. She's been a teacher here for over 19 years. And every time there's an inspection, goodness me, the time leading to that is just, and we'll talk about this in a minute, because I'm really interested in finding questions. I'm not hubris enough to even claim to remotely understand or even find answers. But at least if we're able to ask the right questions, hopefully someone somewhere will get inspired. And obviously this is like you said, critical thinking going in the right direction. But starting with students first, how do you see the current model of inspections, of assessments, of focus on competition, like you said, quantitatively? So you mentioned the different worldwide assessments and tools that can put the UAE as on the map when it comes to ratings and all that. What's the impact of that, again, pragmatically and realistically, on students' creativity? Because the reason why I'm saying this is creativity usually, and this is sort of part of my field of research, is stifled when it's institutionalized. And you said it really beautifully when you juxtaposed IB with the others. Even though IB schools are not doing well, quote unquote, in the assessments, their students are more creative. They're more critical thinkers. They're supposed to be in a different league, on a league of their own, if I may say, or use that term. So that's a long question to reach to. How does this current practices affect creativity in children?
Look, I think from a sort of macro level on that, your assumptions would be right. Let's be honest and say that creativity and obviously the delivery of creativity, which some would say is a definition of innovation, comes when there is more freedom, more encouragement,
empowerment,
for critical thinking, allowing failure. Failure, F-A-I-L, we sometimes say is the first act in learning. I love that.
Wow, no,
F-A-I-L, the first act in learnings. Because if you look at the major breakthroughs in technology or in innovation, everybody talks about Steve Jobs, and how many times did these people fail before they succeeded?
He was fired.
Exactly. But even like the top scientific breakthroughs, what is a scientific experiment? At the root of it is failure, isn't it? You fail, you retest, you retest your assumptions on this hypothesis until you make a breakthrough. And some people would say that the pressure, to answer your question, that the inspection framework brings, not only on that week of inspection, but on everything being around the preparation for that week of inspection, and in particular, the point you raised, that quantitative data is going to be important during that inspection week, you would say that is stifling creativity, and therefore that's stifling innovation.
Obviously, it's an assumption.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm clarifying, yeah.
And part of me says and witnesses and watches that you are correct. The other way to think about this, and I think it's fascinating, is some of the biggest breakthroughs in innovation and technological advancement have been at moments where we are under intense pressure.
Okay.
Now,
if
you think about it, and obviously what I've loved is the debate, the intellectual debate that's came around the Oppenheimer film.
Oh, yes.
And where that fits with AI, and that's a completely different discussion. But there are moments, if you look at the breakthrough in the middle of the Second World War in the coding of I think it wasn't Berkeley, can't remember. Anyway, they brought the best British scientists together, and they said, we are losing this war. We need to break the German code. Oppenheimer, we cannot defeat Japan. Their cultural intensity will not break without this breakthrough. The Germans are developing this. The Soviets are developing this. We need to break through. And innovation and creativity was at the center of those high pressure moments. You bring the best thinkers together, and you need a breakthrough. And even if you think about it, a lot of companies, because you mentioned the word competition, which I think is fascinating, have also done this. Nokia are winning the mobile phone race. Is it a race? Business. Apple, we need to put our great minds together. So what I've reflected on more and more is creativity and innovation doesn't just come in this sort of free-thinking world. It also comes in high-pressure points.
Stress is the root of growth. 100%.
It could be.
You have to stress your muscles for them to grow.
And I think if Her Excellency Aisha or Her Excellency Sarah was sitting in this chair and were asked to justify the pressure that is put on schools and school leaders and CEOs and boards over inspection, they would point empirically to the advancement of education in the UAE, the advancement of international testing results, the fact that schools have moved from acceptable to good to very good to outstanding. That there is, I mean, I think you could argue about what's the right and wrongs of an endpoint examination. You know,
or
why don't we just say?
Let me play the devil's advocate here.
Sorry.
No, but I love the discussion because you're speaking, and in my mind I'm like, so what's the alternative? I mean, if we're gonna go and diss the and I'm not dissing the sort of assessments and the way schools are being governed, because I have zero experience in it and I don't claim to have. But even if I do, what's my alternative? What's the best way at a government level, at a policymaker level, at a CEO level? How can you measure and monitor the performance of schools if it wasn't for this? And that's sort of the thing. That's again, I only ask questions. I don't know the answers to. But then human behavior is what shines and sort of proves whether something is working or not. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, and I keep on saying this, and I said it in a previous podcast, the personality, the human individual is a constant. Environment is variable. Put the human personality in the environment and behavior comes out. So you find the best person, the best principal, the best teacher that's in one school, move them to a different school, and all of a sudden they're a different person. I mean, I'm sure
it doesn't always work. I've tried it.
Yes, exactly. And I always blame environment. Now, call me a socialist. I'm not, but I don't blame the individual. I always blame the soil. So you can have the best seed in the world, put it in a rocky soil, and it won't work. You have to prepare the soil first. You have to have the environment, the oxygen, the light, the sun, everything else, and then you put the seed. Why am I saying this? Is with all those assessments and with all my experience from inside how schools behave when in accordance to assessments. And I have 2 points of view, 2 vantage points. My wife, Iman, she's a teacher. And then my daughters, who are now 14 and 15, right? So they have their fair share of assessments. And both of them unequivocally point out to the, okay, I'm going to say it, the charade that is put on and the masks that are put on. I'm not questioning intentions. I don't care. I'm just talking about the artifacts, the crust that are put on that is only for the assessments, whether teachers trying to quickly prepare their lesson plans, whether they dress the school, properly dress the school the week before the assessment, the way, and this was told to me by my daughters, that the teacher told them what to say and what to do and who they will be asked and what question will be asked when the assessor comes. Now, again, it's not pointing anyone's flaws. I'm not trying to highlight an issue. It's not that. What I'm trying to say is going back to my personality, environment, behavior. So put the environment, behavior comes out. So it's usually not the personality or the individual, it's the environment. And usually the environment, the intention behind the environment is always good. But then you have this behavior. How visible is this behavior to the policymakers, to the people in charge, due to the amount of, let's say, focus we have on the way testing is happening now, in your opinion?
Wow. Every question is so deep. I think education is so deep, isn't it? And do you know, often as you were speaking there, and I will come back to answer your question, one of the beautiful things and incredibly challenging things about being the CEO of an education company is everyone has an opinion on it. I don't think everyone has an opinion on building washing machines or building cars. People that are into that will have an opinion on, say, your board.
That's true.
But the fascinating thing about education is you went to school. So did my chairman. So did my vice chairman. Your daughters go to school. So you and everyone else has an opinion on education.
Exactly.
And there's very few, I could be wrong because sometimes you just see it from your lens. There must be very few industries or companies where everyone has an opinion
And just to add to your
on
point,
what you're doing.
and the danger behind this, and I'm very well aware of this, is a concept called naive realism. Because to me, my anecdote, the way I see is I think it's my experience is the world, right? So that's why I'm clarifying
but
with you
actually,
and to the audience.
it's a massive challenge, but I love that. I love that no matter who I'm speaking to, they have a fairly strong opinion and okay evidence base on it.
Anecdote.
I experienced it. Yeah. Your daughters have experienced it, etc. So I've went off on a tangent there, and I'll come back to whether it's testing or inspection, and whether those at authority level understand the impact of it.
Or even if it's visible to them.
Yeah. And I think it is. And I actually liked your point, which I think we always have to ask ourselves, if it isn't that, then what is it? Maybe that's at the heart of innovation, actually. That question, if we're not going to do it this way, what's the alternative? Can we do it? But again, back to the definition of innovation, it has to be better. There's no point changing something and making it worse.
Absolutely.
And for years, for centuries, and maybe this is the real challenge, or maybe it's the answer. Maybe there isn't a better way. We have judged schools on inspections, and we have judged children on tests.
Yes.
So,
because how else, right?
Well, this is the thing. Either that's inherently wrong and we need to change it, or innovation, creativity hasn't really come up with a different concept. And I think it's improved. You now have a lot of internal assessment. You have, say, there is a British qualification now called BTEC.
Okay.
On the same university entrance qualification in terms of point scoring as A-level. A-level is, as you know, or advanced placement in the American curriculum or diploma phase in the IB curriculum is
for 17 and 18 years old.
Yeah, but it's a fairly high end of curriculum, end of schooling testing point. Usually for university entrance qualification, but usually high stakes exam hall test.
Yep.
BTEC and CP, which is a career qualification in IB, is based on continuous assessment. So not a high stakes examination where we are constantly under less pressured environment testing or not testing, evaluating a student's learning and performance. And that concept that assessment is for learning has to be at the root of a better system. Because what is the point of a test? The point of a test is, where are you in your learning, and what do we need to do then to improve your learning?
Gap assessment.
Exactly. So I like this concept, and it sits more comfortably with me that, say, grade 11 and 12, the final years of schooling, are a continuous assessment out with that 19th century exam hall where, let's face it, I did well. I was okay with the stress of that.
Yeah,
I was in that Oppenheimer moment, or where it was okay. I was under pressure and I knew how to perform and perform well. Some children don't want to do that. It's and as you would point out, it doesn't really encourage creativity. There is the counter argument, but it doesn't really. So I like the fact that we're moving towards that. Now, to go back to inspection, there's great thinkers in this field, and Michael Fullan is one of them. He's a Harvard University professor, and he would say high stakes inspection doesn't work. What works is self-evaluation, which is and an inspection, or whatever you call it, should be about assisted self-evaluation. It should be what's the point of an assessment? Because an inspection really is an assessment of schools. Yes. It's about telling the school what are you doing well, and what you need to do to get better. As soon as we put a grade on it, and I know this, and you know this, as a child, I got my English essay back from the teacher, and there was lots of red pen all over it.
Yeah,
which is feedback, which is powerful.
Yes, it's the root of learning.
But what did you do and what did I do? I went to the end and saw 15 out of 20.
Yes,
that's all I was interested in.
That's it.
If it was 18 out of 20, I didn't want to learn. I've done it.
True.
If it was 10 out of 20, I was devastated because I'd failed. And therefore, I possibly thought I'm not good at English. Okay, the power is to remove the grade, remove outstanding, remove very good, remove good. The power in learning is, what do I need to do to get better? What is the feedback? Feedback is the breakfast of champions.
Of course.
And I suppose if you were looking at inspection, you would say, remove the grading, because once you're outstanding, and I'm sure this isn't true, you might think, what is there to learn? Whereas the power is, this is what you're good at, and this is what you're not good at. And what Michael Fullan would say is, even that's not the power. The power of learning is, how did you self-evaluate? The leaders in the school, they thought, this isn't good, and it's still an area for development, and this is what we're working on. This is where we're doing well. Our maths results might be fantastic. Our science results, we've employed new teachers, we've brought in new thinking, we've introduced new labs to the school. And if your self-evaluation is wrong, that's where the issue is. But if your self-evaluation is strong, then you know what to do to learn and get better. And what he would say is, you need to create a culture of self-evaluation. And that will lead to better schools. Because what is this all about? Is it about the business side of it and being outstanding and filling your seats and making more profit? Or is it about creating better schools where children can learn better? It has to be about that.
I love how you put it together, because those two are almost competing, right? They don't have to be, but I was born and raised here, and I can see the education landscape almost shifting. Hopefully, it's again an anecdote that is based on false experiences. But if you remove all of those ratings, the outstanding, the very good, the good, how can how can schools and school owners and CEOs of educational institutions increase their tuition fees?
Yeah, you're right. You what you've pointed out, and what lots of people would point out is, Alan, that model that you've described of self-evaluation, of schools being about student learning, is right. But fundamentally, in this environment, it's a business. And not so much that, because that immediately turns the whole thing to money. If you don't grade a school or grade a student in a test, how do we really know?
How do we know
where they
exactly?
are? Yeah, I'm a parent. I arrive in Dubai. I want the best quality of education for my child. If there's no grading system, how do I choose a school?
How would I know? Exactly. It's like the Michelin rating for restaurants.
Exactly.
It's like
everything.
It's like the star rating in the hotel business. I mean,
but do we come out of that restaurant and say that food was 8 out of 10? Or do we come out and say, you know what? I loved the food. It was too salty, or it would have benefited from a bit more sauce. Do you see what I mean? In general, in life, we don't say this microphone is 9 out of 10. What we say is it's working, but I would change the color in terms of creativity, or I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so I would change that. How does life work around that's 8 out of 10, or does it work around feedback? How do we improve that?
So within that domain, what's the discourse? What's the current public discourse around this, around assessments? Because you mentioned something extremely powerful, and I love that, which is, and I kind of rephrase, and correct me again if I'm wrong, purpose-driven. So if your purpose is genuinely the nation's prosperity, the nation's welfare, the nation's growth, then obviously that is the goal. And obviously money will be a tool because you need to sustain. Like you said, the business is very, very important. And, unless you're an NGO with charity and some lords who are paying for you, then that's a different story. But if you are here to sustain your business, then you need to have a revenue that obviously is above your cost to be able to grow and provide a better service. And that's, in my world, it's not a transaction at all, it's a value exchange. If I put my daughter in a school and she's happy, she's learning, she's not being taught, she's actually getting education, then to me, paying them is a value exchange rather than buying something from them. And that's the crux of it. But what's the public discourse around that? In Dubai and the UAE, because I'll link that to innovation in a moment, but I need to understand where is it going now?
I suppose a couple of things going, maybe not so much in Dubai, but in the world, there is something called assessment without levels. This is a sort of academic concept that's coming in more and more, and it is about the debate we've just had, which is the student, the student who gets 18 out of 20 doesn't really look at the feedback. Take away the grade and you become more focused on the feedback. So there is an academic discourse around at the moment saying if we truly want children to learn, if we truly want schools to improve, then we have assessment without levels. The discourse at the moment in the UAE, and I think it's fantastic, is the national agenda.
Yes.
How do we improve our English, maths, science, creative thinking, Arabic education in order to put us up the international league tables, which again, there's a political dimension to that. The political dimension is we have a far more educated workforce, but also...
which will drive investments, obviously.
Exactly, yes, also... as a nation or a city or a country, we are climbing league tables. And therefore, I'm an expat sitting in France. Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to move to Dubai. I've had a post as a CFO in a top company. I need to take my children. Are the schools good?
Yes.
And if the schools are excellent, then that decision helps the inflow of expat population into the country. So that discourse is probably sound in relation to government policy.
Yeah, it has a national...
in terms of inspection, I think there is a new Director General of KHD. Dr. Abdullah has left and Her Excellency Aisha has taken over. And I love when any new leader takes over. I love watching them and I love reflecting on what would I do. Whether that's a football manager taking over a football team or a CEO taking over a company or someone like Her Excellency Aisha taking over a government department. And what she's doing is listening. I think always in your first 3 months, you should just listen. Yes. You should observe.
What's her background?
You should evaluate. It's government. She was from the Executive Council. I know people like Her Excellency Sarah, who's running ADEC, is actually an engineer. I'm okay with that. I don't think you need to be an educationalist to run an education company. Sometimes I love that I am because you're that person that's been on the shop floor or in the factory and came to the top. But I don't think you need to be. I just think
diversity.
You need to listen. You need to understand, and then you bring your skill set into that business. And so I think that it will be interesting to see where she takes the inspection agenda and how that sits with that sort of national agenda, and also how it sits with this current education philosophy. Say it could be the careers program in IB or the BTEC in A-level, where let's not put a child in a 19th century exam hall and judge them at the very last minute on 18 years of education.
Yes, and I think that the unique demographic of the United Arab Emirates specifically and the GCC in general also has its own impact on the way policymakers and people in kind of decision-making positions are viewing this. And what I mean by that is let's say everybody's taught Finland and Sweden and education in that part of the world. And every now and then, I'm sure people send you all these forwards about these kind of shorts and clips of people going there and students who are just playing on trees and climbing, I don't know, in nature and so on and so forth. And then they juxtapose it to 19th century testing, American style, UK style, which we're adopting here. But then that type of environment when it comes to education requires, like you said, a shared vision, requires a purpose and a long-term hope for a nation that, dare I say, you belong to. But the dynamic demographic of this part of the world is like 90% of people that are here are, and again, I don't mean it as a negative way, but it's a realistic, I'm very pragmatic, so mercenaries, as in people come here, want to make a living, rightfully so, and then leave back home. Now that was corrected during the COVID time with the golden visa and all those sorts of relaxation when it comes to policy and how people are able to stay here and the sponsorship. But still, I'm looking and my hearts are with the policymakers. I'm still asking the same question. How would you judge a school that its administration, its faculty, its teachers, and everybody in that system that's providing that education to the country's children, probably most of them are 3, 4, 5 years in the country, and probably quite percentage of them are just new to the country. So how on earth are they going to share that purpose and vision? And it can't be deep to the point that they are vested in 20 years from now. I mean, that's very deep. I understand that, but
I think you've
very unique.
It's amazing, and that's why I'm here. That's why you're here. It's just so dynamic and challenging and exciting.
But that's you and I, and that's the point.
Yeah, but let's pick apart some of the topics that you've raised there, because I think they're fascinating, because you've touched on so many issues in one question. Firstly, I think it's changing, and we started the podcast talking about each other, talking about why are we here, how long you've been here. I mean, you grew up in the UAE, which is just an amazing, your story is amazing. But, I came here for 2 years, and 10 years later, I'm still here. And I think what I'm seeing is, and now I've got a big education company, but not huge. And, I'm seeing less and less children leaving. And guess what? That's at the same time as the property market is booming. And you often, we've talked in the podcast a lot about sort of qualitative judgments around our lives. So even if you just take your friendship groups or your dinner party table, in the first, and I've only been here 10 years, people have been here much longer. In the first few years, people were here for 2 years and then were gone.
Yes.
Now, people are buying property. People are laying down roots. People are saying, I might not go back to Lebanon. I might not go back to Scotland. I might not go back to Washington, because actually, I might stay here. And whether it's a golden visa, whether it's the right to retire, whether it's the encouragement to invest and buy property, are we beginning to see an expat community that will be less fluid than it was previous? And I think that's a fascinating discussion.
Yes. It's very unique as well. You can't apply a theory from, let's say, Europe or Finland or the States, or even Japan or Far East here, because this is very unique.
Exactly. So I think there's an economic discussion around that leads to societal impact. And I think if you look at the vision of the UAE government, from Sheikh Mohammed, but down to the likes of His Excellency Halal Al-Mari, and the vision of moving the city towards South Dubai, Palm, Jebel Ali, all these vision projects that you talked about, Vision 2030 in Riyadh, or Vision, I think, 2040 here. It's about creating sustainable communities, environmentally friendly communities, where within 10 minutes you will have a nursery, a school, a hospital, a shopping centre, a cinema. So almost what communities are in Western Europe, which took hundreds of years to develop around a river. A community grows up, you go to your community school, you use your community hospital. We're actually almost reverse engineering that into an environmentally sustainable South Dubai city. And I just love that visionary thinking. It's just so exciting. And we hope to open a few schools in South Dubai to be part of that agenda. I'm going to go back to the other part of your question, and you answered the question right at the beginning of the podcast, which is, we have this country, Finland, Nokia, and the success of it, with high taxation and teachers valued and paid the same as doctors and lawyers, okay? And they go up the league tables, and based around forest schools and that lovely concept of play-based learning. But you said yourself, you can't just take a principle out of here, move them into another school, and it works. That whole piece around cultural relativism and understanding the community you're working in. So, for example, we're doing a really exciting thing called desert schools.
Okay.
We can't have a forest.
Yes. Otherwise, it's artificial.
Exactly.
Right?
But what we're saying is, how do children learning in this natural environment? So I think you can take ideas and put them into your system. I love the JFK quote about leadership, but I've actually been thinking about it in relation to innovation and creativity as well. And whether it was attributed to him or whether he actually said it, I don't know. But I actually saw it in the Boston JFK Museum. And it's great leaders take other people's ideas and make them better. Because I think often we associate innovation with this boom, wow idea.
This light bulb moment.
Yeah, but it's not, is it? It's scientific. 100%. It's incremental. It's test and fail. And I've often thought about leadership in my own journey that I'm not the most innovative, creative guy, but I've been able to watch things that work and take them and try and make them better, almost in the words of JFK. And at the same time, I think the other fascinating thing about change and improvement is, and I love this quote, and I don't know who said it, but you should always recruit people that are better than you,
smarter than you.
Your team, and it's all about even that
Steve
Oppenheimer thing, or the Steve Jobs thing, or the breakthrough with coding in the middle of the Second World War. It wasn't one person.
Absolutely.
It wasn't Oppenheimer.
No.
There was a team of scientists around him, just the same as right now the breakthroughs in AI, etc. It's not one person. You've got teams of people testing and failing completely. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but there was so many aspects to it.
See, I think what I want. We started, talking about education in general, and then we talked about how the curriculums and different curriculums are there in Dubai, and how unique Dubai is from being agnostic to curriculum, but also focusing and honing down on the language, on the culture, on the national agenda, and on the religion. And then we went down into the assessments and different assessments, whether it's for children or for schools, and its impact on both, and then what's the alternative. And obviously we have to work with what we have, and that's, like you said, it's as old as age and time. And if there's a new way of doing it, then maybe it's worth exploring. And I'm sure that there are multiple schools that are testing new methodologies, and it can't be, obviously it's too dangerous, especially on education sectors like the medical sector. I always say the aviation, medical, and education are three very sensitive sectors. Two are immediate and one is far, which is education. And anything you do now, its impact you'll see only 10 years from now, which is usually, if it's good, then great. If it's not, then that sets you back 10 years back. And it's very dangerous to play. So you have to be very careful in the way you design change, if I may say.
And I don't know where you're going with that question, but in relation to innovation, it's risk, isn't it? The key is risk, and those sectors, aviation and hospitals, obviously much more important than education, but
sensitive, not important. I think.
But education is up there, isn't it?
It is. 100%.
We can't experiment with children, can we? Parents place their child. Forget the money aspect of it, that though it will be important. That there is a financial transaction involved, but you place your child into the care of a teacher or a headmaster or a school or a system, and it can have a detrimental impact.
Yes.
One of the things that frightens me in terms of quantitative data is like in the homeroom, elementary, primary part of education, one bad teacher can set your child's maths back by
100%.
a year or two, and I'm acutely conscious of that burden, and so are our principals and our teachers. But, again, that's the risk, and being risk averse or not is part of why perhaps innovation and creativity could be stifled.
So, I mean, where I was going, and so here's the kind of the cliffhanger, right, of the whole story. If you look at the world map, you have the Americas, you have the Middle East, and then so the West, you have the Middle East, and then you have the East. And then if you map the innovation, the radical innovation, production and exportation, you'll find that the red, the heat map, is usually from the East and the West. But the Middle East, especially the GCC, is almost a blind spot. And I've had multiple discussions with multiple people, high and low in society, leaders, entrepreneurs, and everybody is pointing at education. Now, that's not to blame you, but I think that the intention here is to make sure that, or they try to make sure that it is not them. Now, drivers of innovation is clear. Now, obviously, innovation is extremely important. It is the main predictor for a nation's prosperity. It's the main predictor for the future and sustainability of a nation, the growth and all that sort of stuff. So, and I'm talking about the radical innovation. Like you said, radical innovation is not that light bulb. It's a process that takes years and years until it's just there. But then if you have that process in abundance, then you have that radical innovation. This is why you have Silicon Valley. This is why you have the Netherlands. This is why you have Germany and Japan, China, and all those nations that soar from that perspective. We don't, pragmatically, empirically. So the Global Innovation Index, and I mentioned it in another podcast, we're trailing behind as a GCC, as a group, as nations. I'm not talking about geopolitical borders or politics. It's real innovation according to publications, whether it's scientific publications, whether it's patent applications, whether it's general technology, whether it's sophistication of business, all that sort of stuff. Now, most people blame education, as I mentioned to you. But drivers of innovation are four. You have government, you have capital, you have talent, and you have culture. In education, it takes two. It takes two to tango. It takes the school system, but it takes the culture, house, family, parents, the entire society. It sounds to me, and that's again my naive realism, and please correct me, and I'm here to learn, right? It sounds to me that the pressure is on you as an education, as an industry. And because of the amount of people talking about it, everybody's blaming education. But, as you said, I was educated in public schools. Now, that's not demeaning the public schools by any stretch of the imagination, but as I said, I learned my ABCs the first time I saw my A as a letter. I was in grade 4, which makes me, I think, 9 years old. And I think I'm doing okay when it comes to English. When it comes to business education, same thing. I've never had a business education in my life, right? But then I educated myself. Now, that doesn't give me any credit. I haven't reached anywhere yet. But what I'm trying to say is, if it is the education to blame, then there are many, like you said, the astronaut and others. Why isn't anybody talking about culture. Again, government, capital, talent, and culture. And when I talk about culture, I talk about either the macro culture or the micro culture within communities. What do you think about that?
If I don't come back to universities, bring me back to universities. Okay. I think I'm going to go back almost to the start of the podcast when we were talking about me growing up in Scotland. You've just talked about your background again, which is fascinating. When you learn in a British school, probably still to this day, they, instead of a round world, they create a flat one.
Yeah.
And guess what country's right in the middle of that flat world? When you spread it out and you look at America and China, they put Britain right in the center of the world. Okay. What a imperial empire-based concept that you'd flatten this world. As a young child, every classroom in the UK, you had this map of the world with Britain right in the center of it. And of course, perhaps in the 19th century or previously, you could have argued that the British Empire was at the center of the world. Just the same as same as we've had the Roman Empire at the center of the world. People are now, I love all this intellectual research now that the American Empire is now in decline and the Chinese Empire is coming. And maybe this
global north
flat
and
world
global south,
is changing. Why am I talking about that? I'm talking about that to say that in so many ways, if you were to flatten the world now, you're saying, and I'll come back to my university answer, that there's a red hot piece around California and there's a red hot flashing piece around China. But if you take the other four aspects, you've got, and I absolute credit to the UAE, you've got DXB, International Airport, right at the center of the world, Emirates airline. And I think the country have done amazing. The other thing is these empires, and sorry to get big and philosophical and massively macro, were built and declined, rose and declined over hundreds and hundreds of years, okay? This country was formed in the 1970s.
Yeah.
You know, Taaleem have been around for 20 years. And in the history of the world, it's a blink of an eye, okay? So I actually think if you take government initiatives, we're so exciting. If you take a culture where Russians and Ukrainians are living together, and so many, like my schools have like 89 nationalities and we celebrate International Day and you've got this wonderful
harmony
world. But at the heart of it, also celebrating UAE National Day. And kids from England and America and Syria and Russia wearing the UAE flag and the UAE colours. Culture. And, you know, I think the UAE government are actually doing pretty well. If we were to do what we've said we won't do in the podcast, you know, we'd be giving them 7 or 8 out of 10 so far. Now, why are we not this red flashing? And you're right, if you look at studies or empirical evidence, etc., it's because at the heart of Silicon Valley and China will be very rich universities, because a lot of this deep scientific innovation is coming around incredible university campuses.
Yes.
So, and I accept responsibility. You know, we have, I think, and I'm not blowing my trumpet in any way, shape or form, or Taaleem's, in K-12 education, in the 10 years I've been here, or the 20 years since I, you know, came and there was no Palm and no Marina and no Burj Khalifa. Like, you know, I've got friends who have been here over 20 years. You've been here your whole life. There was about 5 good schools in Dubai.
Yes.
You know, we have the honour of having Jebel Ali in our portfolio now. You've got the historic schools like Dubai College and English College. But now there are incredible K-12 schools. And I'm not just crediting Taaleem. You've got brilliant, world-class in terms of examination results, PISA, Pearls, TIMSS, A-level statistics, world-class schools in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Now, the next thing, and I know this is on the government agenda, is to bring world-class universities here. And I do believe that you need that university culture because, you know, you quoted things like research papers and things like that. They're coming from California, they're coming from Beijing. But you need, or they're coming from Western Europe around Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, Sorbonne, that type of place. You need world-class university education.
Research engines.
So I believe we've got world-class schools, K-12. And what I see developing now, you've got the University of Birmingham coming here, Wollongong, you've got so many universities starting up that is the next part of making this a centre of excellence for academia. And when you have a centre of excellence for academia,
then everything
flows. And so credit a nation born in the 1970s that on the other four parts of your criteria are actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's true.
In a pretty small
100%
period of time.
I mean, I always say this when you look at the four criteria for innovations, which are the drivers for innovation: government, highest trust. You can't ask for more than that. I mean, they provide
and
everything
stability.
for you. Stability, trust, harmony, cohesion,
but an innovative mindset.
And an innovative mindset. Because I also mentioned it in a different podcast, which is I've read a paper that was published last year in August about why are we behind in innovation. And the conclusion is governments needs to do more in the GCC specifically and Saudi and UAE. And I was furious because, and I actually wrote back to them, what more do you expect from these governments? They provide security and safety. They provide infrastructure. They provide education. They provide healthcare. That's what governments need to do.
Much of that
economic stability.
None.
Exactly. And that's unequivocal. And by the way, that's no easy feat. It's not like because you have, and I go to, lots of conferences abroad and people never been here. They, okay, because of the oil and gas. Okay, Venezuela has oil and gas. Libya had oil and gas, and much more than this part of the world, especially Dubai, that doesn't have any oil and gas. So it's not natural resources. It's actual leadership. It's actual government. It's actual policymakers and decision makers en masse. I think what I'm getting at is you have a government, 100%. You have capital. Obviously, there's an abundance of that. You have talent. We were rated number 3 as talent magnets and attracting talent around the world. And obviously, we have a cohesive culture. We don't have right versus left. We don't have these culture wars. And everything is cohesive and it's done by design. It's not by accident. The university discussion is very interesting because this is a pillar in Aximind, the venture that we're going at right now, which is bringing university and research, especially in humanities, management, leadership, areas related fundamentally to innovation. But what I'm trying to say is, and that's again not trying to kind of double down on my question, that's not what I mean, but why isn't there, and I think I kind of know the answer to this question, there's a macro cultural element, which is the national culture of avoiding conflict, avoiding sensitive topics, saving face, all those sort of national cultures. So for example, in the West, you would find more people going to the boss and opposing them without being afraid. Here, even if you, Alan, try to do it, people probably wouldn't do it. Sorry, even if you try to enable it as an environment, people won't do it because of that. And I take, from academia as well in Africa, I have a very nice lady. She's a cleaner. She comes and cleans my office here. She's from Africa. Clearly, she's educated because she can talk and I have discussions with her. Alan, not a single time she had eye contact with me. And in my culture, and I'm assuming the same thing with your culture, if you're talking to someone and they don't make eye contact, that's a slightly disrespectful way. Because why aren't you looking at me? It's like she's busy doing something else and everything else. But because I understand culture and that's my field of research, in Africa, not having eye contact is actually part of the respect they pay to the superior. So with that context in mind, and with the cultural the cultural traits of this part of the world, again, respect for authority, I would say risk aversion, generally speaking, to save face and to avoid conflict and to avoid, how can you have public discourse and debate in this environment? Yeah. And again, could be a rhetorical question, I don't know, but I'm interested in your personal opinion.
Yeah, deep. And look, in terms of the theories of leadership and, you know, how that leads to innovation, you're right. You know, there's all the things about creating a team around you who are complementary to skill set, who are better at you in their particular field, whether that's the CFO being highly skilled in finance or the head of operations, chief operations officer, understanding the technicalities of air conditioning and things like that, much more than I do. And then there's the theory that, you know, what really takes a company to the next level or a country is debate and discussion.
Yes.
And someone being brave enough to come and say,
and ask
you're making a mistake, this is wrong. And I love that. And in the education sector, that's not hard, because I remember when I was doing my academic qualification for leadership, you have to do a placement in industry. And I was in a really top industrial sector that makes garments for the golf industry in Scotland, worldwide. And the managing director and myself were discussing leadership and company improvement and how to make breakthroughs. And he said, I couldn't do your job. I said, like, why not? He said, because in my factories, nobody has a university degree. So I have workers who basically comply and do what I tell them to do. He said, in your industry, every single person has a university degree. All the teachers are as qualified as you to do your job.
Okay.
If you get it, you
so
know, like,
is that a bad thing or a good
no,
thing?
I think in his view, in his view, it was a difficult, challenging thing. But I remember, in relation to your question, thinking exact opposite, going, wow, everybody in my factory, which happens to be a school, has a university degree. Think of the power of thinking, intellectualism, experience, expertise.
The size of the mind that you have.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
But it doesn't work if you operate that factory or school in I know best, I have all the answers, you do your job.
In a telling way.
And if you have a workforce that is highly skilled and highly academic, then you have to encourage, if you like, is dissent too strong a word, but different thinking. And your premise here is that culturally, that might be difficult in the UAE. But what I would say is the greatest minds, and I have had the honour and privilege of, I think it'd be too strong to say working with them, but at least engaging with them, at the top echelons of the UAE government do have that mindset. You know,
and
tell me if you take
that's true.
Take
that's
the director general, you know, of KHDA just coming in.
Yeah.
From the executive council, no experience of schools. What's the first thing she is doing? Listening. What's right? What's wrong? What should we continue to do? What do we need to do better? So I think I am positive and encouraged that the top leadership has that thinking. I don't know if further down at company level that there is a compliance agenda, and we both know that there is cultural aspects of some of the top percentage of nationalities that work and live here who come from a culture where you disrespect the boss or the manager or the CEO or the principal of a school, if you say, knock on their door and say, I don't think this is right.
Yes. And that
stifles innovation without a doubt.
That stifles innovation 100%. I mean, there are two key points that you've mentioned here. First is that barrier to actually voice out my critical thinking and the way I see things, whether it's an opinion or a fact. And that's unequivocally true. And I know this for a fact because I had few of my guests who actually, or my friends who actually in a high position that refused to be on that seat simply because they're afraid of, long form discussions. They're afraid of what could be public. And to them, they're like, oh, I need to take the nod from X or from Y. And I'm like, but I'm not interested in what you represent. I'm interested in your mind, in the idea, and the knowledge, and the experience. And this discussion is obviously we're not doing any scientific research here. It's just discussion. It's a discourse that hopefully will inspire someone somewhere to do something. But yeah, I mean, this is...
Well, let me answer that because I've had, again, the honour and the privilege of working for Emirati leadership over the past 10 years, whether that is Mr. Bakar, who is a successful businessman who runs King's Education, single family ownership, or whether it's the Taaleem board. 7 out of the 9 over the 5 years, indeed over the 20 years, have been Emirati, senior Emirati, some of them. I have never felt in both contexts that I can't give
voice
my opinion,
out your opinion,
and never felt that my opinion hasn't been listened to and indeed actioned. So it's not a macroeconomic study. It's not specifically quantitative, but it's fairly informed because we're talking about a highly successful family business.
Yes.
Emirati owned and a Taaleem board, previously 99% Emirati shareholding and now a major public company. So I think if anybody's listening to this podcast and thinks, what's life like as a CEO in the UAE, are management really driving the company or is it Emirati ownership? I'm not frightened to take that pause when you ask that question, say, I better ask someone if I can say this. I have found that, and these are fairly typical companies in the UAE, family ownership or Emirati shareholding, that they have an opinion and they are informed and they are deeply experienced with great expertise, but they will always listen to management's opinion.
And I second that. Now, all my life, I've always been able to go up to my boss, and I was an employee before, now I'm an entrepreneur, and voice my concerns, and almost always never felt this barrier, which is usually invisible. Or let's say usually it becomes invisible once I go through it. It's sort of, it's like a VR thing. You touch through it and then there's nothing, and then once you know. But again, this is my anecdote. I'm attributing that to probably my personality, which is outgoing, which I'm not an extrovert, I'm more of an ambivert, but I know that I'm articulate, I'm able to put my words, or to put my thoughts into words, I'm able to kind of substantiate my argument in a way that makes it appealing to the superiors, I'm able to kind of accept criticism from them, and I'm assuming that you're the same at probably much higher level dealing with those leadership. What I'm talking about is not the leaders, because I second what you're saying. I was born here. I lived all my life here. I've seen how this place since early 80s to 90s to early 2000s. And my first job was in 1999. And that from that point onwards, it hasn't been anything less than of proper opportunity-based and growth. I've never faced as a non-Emirati that I'm treated differently or I'm being stifled. If I put in work, I get results. And that's the crux of it. And I love the Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of Dubai, and his 8 commandments about Dubai. And the second one is clear: nobody's above the law, starting with the ruling family. And that's a very bold and strong statement that speaks to exactly what you said. But it's not the leadership, and it's not the educator, it's not the elite. It's sort of everybody else. And this is where I'm very pragmatic. And to your point, and again, this is not a question, it's just a discussion. It's just, in my mind, we need to have more research. I'll give you a small example. I was facilitating a sort of a think tank in the Dubai Future Foundation a few months back. And it was mostly leadership, mostly educated in the West, let's say Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, and so on and so forth. And one said, oh, but leaders has to be extroverts. And obviously, when I asked him, he's American educated, executive education. You know how the American way is always the loudest, the strongest, the more charismatic. Those are the leaders. So when I asked him that, I said, where did you get this from? And he quoted a couple of leadership theories from the West. And obviously, he was taught there and brought it here. And that's the thing. Why are we importing things from outside? And that goes back to the universities thing and the schools thing and the curriculums things. And I think we could have... We just spend a few minutes on here. Why are we importing? Why are we not creating things here? Be it curriculums, be it universities, be it systems, processes. We have enough experience, and we rub shoulders with all of those systems and processes and ways of doing things, methodologies, that allows us now to do things. And to your point about the time and how long the UAE and others, we're at a time now where everything is crashed. Like before, you need to write something, let's say 500 words. Now you can have an AI assist you with it, and you can write it in almost a fraction of the time. So the hyper competition element is very high. So we can crash time. But I think my question is, what's your thoughts on importing versus creating when it comes to those areas?
I think that I would go back to JFK's quote, believe it or not, and I would say that let's not always assume that everything has to be brand new and stamped with made in the UAE. It doesn't need to be great leaders. It could be great companies or great countries take other people's ideas and make them better. So I think with 89 to 120 nationalities living here, there's an incredible opportunity to take different cultural leadership models. When you were speaking about the American system, I was immediately in my mind thinking the Japanese stock market is on fire, and the Japanese leadership model for a company, highly successful companies, Toyota, et cetera, would be a very different boardroom dynamic than the American.
The West, yeah.
So, I think as the UAE, you say, don't reflect back on that because we are at this crash point, but there is an opportunity here to create a made in the UAE brand, but it doesn't need to be brand new. It can be.
It doesn't. No.
It can be the best of all worlds, and appreciating cultural differences in leadership models that work, as you said, your point, not my point, in different cultural environments. So that outspoken, dynamic, extrovert, charismatic leadership model that you see in the America of, say, Donald Trump can be successful in that context. The boardroom in Japan, which would be very, very different, humble, and much more collective and much more collegiate and much more deep thinking and quiet, can still be very, very successful. Your point perhaps is, what is brand UAE leadership? What does it look like? What fundamentally will it be? And I reflect on my boardroom, but I think let's reflect on far more prominent boardrooms like the Emirates boardroom.
Yes.
And you have dynamic incredible UAE leadership in that boardroom with high quality Western leadership working together to create one of the best airlines in the world that on a daily basis innovates to get better planes, better quality of service, more routes coming in, creating Fly Dubai as like a different vertical of the company. So, let's take a step back and say that there are many companies in the UAE that are getting this right, and I think they're getting it right at government level, and that's my personal opinion. Let's also, sometimes you've got to say, okay, what's working for us? But let's evaluate ourselves on the rest of the world,
Yeah.
Is America going right? Is the UK going right? The Prime Minister of the UK had to step out of his office on a Friday night to express concerns about radicalism on the streets of the country and in political parties. Let's not sit here and assume that Japan or America or China are getting it right. And I'm not saying they're getting it wrong. There are fantastic companies and government initiatives and people, leadership, universities, schools in these countries. But honestly, and I'm not just saying this because, I love the UAE. You've been here for a long time. I think there's a lot of things we're getting right.
Yeah.
And as you said, as long as there is still an opinion that says, what are we getting wrong? What can we do better? How can we grow? How can we innovate? How can we excel? Then I think for such a young country, we're in a strong position.
And I think
now, back to that flattened map of the world, Emirates in so many ways are putting it at the center of it. I think once the schooling system evolves into a strong university system, we'll have that point where that flashing red is coming up around. And think of the journey that Riyadh is on and is about to go on. Incredible things happening in KSA. So, yeah, I still got a lot of hope that, I might not see it, but the GCC and the UAE might one day be the flashing red that you're looking for.
Which is en route for that, 100%. This is, you see, no question about that. When you have a plan and you have targets and you have measures and monitors to assess how you're doing against those targets. And the track record, especially in the UAE and Dubai, since they've done it before, and Saudi now, with the Vision 2030, it's clear that everything is on track. It's not about questioning government intentions. It's not about questioning government policies or government, let's say generally officials' way of looking at things. Because if you think about it, policymakers are there to legislate, to put controls and to facilitate growth, to facilitate economy and prosperity for the people. I think my point, and I'll end with that, is from when you look at it from a truly purpose-driven, and we'll go back to that, purpose-driven, there are multiple elements that stifles that purpose. There's a research paper coming out of the GCC as well that highlights native speakerism, which is a phenomena that prefers, let's say, native English speakers over non-native English speakers, especially in education as teachers, that you might have someone who's highly qualified, but because they're non-native, they probably wouldn't be selected. I have personal experience with individuals who are teachers in my circles who are non-English. They were hired, so kudos to the school that hired them, but then the families, the parents of that school actually submitted an official complaint and worked against that teacher for some time until that teacher was proven to be worthy of that position. So again, it's not about the leadership. It's not about the government. Again, when you look at the drivers for innovation, you'll find that we have all the ingredients. It's like we have the best ingredients for the best dish in the world. It's just that I think the intention here is just to open up the discussion, so we bring to the awareness those nuances that and the extremely complicated and multifaceted, and by no means reducing anything to a cause and effect sort of relationship. It's not. It's just opening a discussion. But if you look at those elements and then you put them together and then you say, if that is not attacked, I go back to by attacked, I mean addressed and discussed. If I go back to the Dubai Future Foundation sort of discussion that I facilitated, one of the discussions is, let's bring, I don't know, Harvard University, and we have a campus here. So my question is, okay, why was it? I don't mind that as a idea, as a suggestion, as a prospect, but why was it the first thing that came to your mind?
To go out with.
To come and bring. Why not, like you said,
the Zayed University.
Yes, yeah. Zayed University.
University of Sharjah.
Khalifa University, UAE University. Why is it that the first thing that came into your mind is to import? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. You've actually raised at the end of the podcast quite a big issue there, and you've actually really got me thinking, because you went from the macro down to the micro about the teacher appointment system. And almost I'm going right back to the beginning of the podcast and my own schooling and the conversation about Scots in the context of the United Kingdom. And, you know, there are so many, you'll have a richer knowledge of the Arabic dialect than I do. And, you know, I've learned so much over the last 10 years about spoken Arabic and the strengths and weaknesses of, say, how Jordanians speak Arabic and the importance of the Emirati dialect, etc., etc. But when you were speaking, I was thinking that, see, we actually speak Scots, and we talked about Gaelic, didn't we, at the beginning of the podcast? And I remember in school being told to speak the Queen's English. And almost now there has been a reaction to that. We discussed the Welsh language, etc., etc. And honestly, you know, I get that. Like some families, some local, some expats say, if I'm sending my child to Dubai British School or the American Academy, then I want a native British or American speaker. Honestly, I'm now in a situation, particularly in the public-private partnership, when you are educating Arabic first language speakers, where that ability to dual language is so powerful in the classroom, where someone that's, say, Jordanian or Egyptian can go between English and Arabic fluently. Yep. Now, the argument of some parents is, if my son or daughter is learning English, you know, I want them to speak an English language. Now, this makes me smile because so many people won't pick up on it, but a Scottish person from Glasgow, a Liverpudlian from Liverpool, a Mancunian from Manchester, a Londoner, a Dubliner. Honestly, there is no such thing as English. You know, there is the Queen's English, which is how the present king or queen would speak. But they went to sort of, you know, an Eton or a Harrow type education. Top school, whereas you know and I know that the dialects across the Arabic world are so different. Completely, and when I'm tuning in, I hear Arabic, but you will hear Lebanese Arabic and Egyptian Arabic and Emirati Arabic. So you know, I think to bring it back to your question, that there's even that cultural understanding of that needs to be developed.
Yes,
and
I think it's maturity.
Yeah, exactly.
We're getting there. I mean, to your point, and
I don't think I answered the question there.
No, it's not. It wasn't a question per se. I mean, obviously, it's not a question as in it has an answer. And again, I only raise questions not to get an answer, but to open up a discussion.
And the discussion you opened up and has been your point is that there is certainly that sort of growth mindset among the top leaders of the country to take our country forward and take it to the next level. Because
that's the only way, right?
But are we seeing that further down? But, you know, I don't think the UAE is unique there. I think if you went to any country in the world, you'd have the political infrastructure and the political elites that have a vision for the country, and whether on the streets of the cities of that country that's reflected is a whole different question.
So I'm daring to say this because of the vision of the leaders, because obviously I'm a nobody in the grand scheme of things, right?
Nobody's a nobody.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is from decision making, from policy making, from societal impact, you try to align if the higher purpose is good. And what I say is, or what I see and think and live day in, day out, is that the value alignment is on point, 100%, with everything when it comes to fairness, when it comes to opportunity and growth, when it comes to innovation and risk-taking and future thinking and all that. So I think my part, and this is where my research is, this is why my work is, this is what my startup is about that element, that nuanced discussion that allows us to open up our minds to different things. And I'll tell you what I mean, and we'll close with this. My research, one of the findings of my research is that and my research wasn't about education, it was about innovation in corporates. And in Dubai, and one of the findings is there's a massive incongruence between what leaders think and what employees feel. So what leaders think employees feel and what employees actually feel. And there's a massive incongruence between the culture of the organization and the innovation targets of the innovation. So for instance, innovation, like you said, needs empowerment, trust, risk-taking, etc., etc. However, the culture is a controlled culture. So there's authoritarianism, there is central controls, policy enforcement and focus, and so on and so forth. So those two are incongruent. However, companies are performing at double-digit growth for the past God knows how many years, especially during COVID. And you know how we handled COVID perfectly. So what that meant, now that wasn't part of my research. This is hopefully I'll be able to commission different research moving forward to kind of empirically study this, is that because of this, and to your point, leaders think that everything is rosy because they obviously, how would they know? I mean, I was a leader for a group of 40 people, and I didn't see beyond my direct reports because it's impossible. When I say I didn't see, going there and shaking hands with people doesn't mean anything because you need to live with them day in, day out. And the moment you step in, they change masks just to kind of put their best face for you. And that's I think the point that I'm trying to make is that if you look at the quantitative, and we go back to the first, and we'll end with this, if we go back to the quantitative ways of looking at things, that can be hugely skewed. And the question that was asked by all of my interviewees in my research is that how sustainable is that? Because yes, it's doing good now. Yes, we're growing. But then at the heart of hearts, if we're not actually having that long process of innovation, starting from education in schools, to universities and research, to corporate cultures and the way people are being treated in organizations, all the way to patent and research, to the innovation contribution to the economic prosperity of a nation, that is what a nation should focus on. Now we have everything, right? We have all the ingredients. I think it's just a matter of maturity, to your point.
Yeah. Look, I always love reading the stories and admiring CEOs who get under the surface of their company. And I think often that is where true change and innovation lies. It's sometimes the best TV that you can watch when the CEO of, say, a huge company just goes down onto the factory floor and
yes,
says, doesn't necessarily even say is the CEO, and just finds out what is actually going on at that level. Now, that's not always possible, particularly if your company is not so huge that pretty much everybody in your company knows you're the CEO. But, you know, I do think that is the power of transformational change. And I think earlier in the podcast, we touched on this, and it's about trust, isn't it? And
yes.
it's not just about trust, it's about having leaders at all levels who want to learn. It's a culture of learning in the organization that says, look, we will only truly innovate and truly transform and truly improve if everybody's voice is valued. Because I'll tell you what, the teacher in the American Academy, or the teacher in Dubai British School, or the teacher in Raha International School, or the teacher in the public-private partnership really knows what's going on. Not the CEO sitting in his glass tower who, as you say, monitors the data, monitors the outcomes, monitors the financial performance and the academic performance, and thinks everything's okay. And I think you've got to have a leadership team at that level, at the top level, but at every level. The principals in the schools, the heads of the maths department, and the board of directors of Taaleem, who truly value the voice of every single employee, from the security guard to the cleaner, to the teacher, to the principal, about self-improvement. How do you self-evaluate your school, your company? How do you truly know what's going on? And are you a company or a school or a department like the maths department that really want to get better
and to grow?
And that is the power of transformation.
That is the power of transformation. Alan, I think I can go for hours with you. It's been a fascinating. This is the first podcast that I go actually so deep in education, because obviously it's your forte.
That's the business.
Exactly. That's
as I said, we don't make washing machines. We make young people, and that's why I love my job.
And I'm not saying this because my wife is a teacher, but I truly think that education is the make it or break it for any nation, period. People talk about innovation, people talk about creativity, people talk about economic prosperity. The foundation is education. And this is the things that the UAE and the region is focusing on. And I've read all of those national agendas, and the promise is so grand that, you know, the word hope has no meaning here. It's actual when. And you and I think we feel that we're a big part of this. And in my startup, I try to kind of push that to the absolute limits. So the discussion is real. So thank you very much for your time. Any last words? Anything that you would like to say?
Even just listening to your closing remarks and thinking about the definition of innovation, it has to be about learning, doesn't it? Look, everything in life, whether it's your personal life or whether it's your employment or your corporate life, you have to want to learn. And if you want to learn and want to get better, and that's true of the leaders of the nation, then you'll do okay. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show, to listen to you and to be inspired by you. And look, I have the honor and privilege of being a CEO in the UAE, and I'm really excited about the future.